Throughout centuries, mankind waged many wars, many of them righteous, many of them, if not more, not so righteous. Whenever we are playing a strategy game set in medieval Europe, the most satisfying part of the gameplay is when we start building army, and especially when we send it to battle. In the games like Age of Empires or Total War, the resources needed to build an army are unlimited, as long as they appear on the map. What we tend to forget is how much of a human resources was necessary to build an army. In early medieval times, the army could count below hundreds to about 1,000 soldiers. But with progress of times, the number of soldiers in medieval army could count tens of thousands of soldiers. One of the examples is the Battle of Grunwald, where between 16 to 39,000 Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth soldiers fought against 11 to 27,000 soldiers of Teutonic Order. Those numbers become especially large if we take under consideration the average size of the medieval country. It is said that Poland in year 1493 counted 7.5 million people. This indicates that 0.5% of people of Poland and Lithuania were involved in formation of its army. It might not be much, but if 0.5% of active duty personnel was involved in formation of Polish army today, it would count roughly 200,000 people. The army size similar to nowadays France, or 1.3 times bigger than UK's army, or 1.1 times bigger than German army. It is also important to mention that those armies are considered one of the biggest in Europe. It is evident that armies and battles were a norm in medieval times. But what is also certain is the cruelty and violence during the battles. This brought the attention of scholars and researchers to investigate them and the method of treatments of various injuries sustained during the battle. Head and face traumas were one of the most common types of injuries and were widely commented by common folk due to their visibility. Such injuries could also cause the damage to the brain, further affecting the behavior of the injured person. One must remember that there was a thin line between prestigious battle scar and a facial injury so disfiguring or disabling that they engendered horror and rejection. Early medieval law codes, issued by kings in the nascent states of Western Europe after the fall of Rome, lists number of injuries for which compensation payment will be provided after the battle. This includes breaking the skull and degree of exposure of the brain, striking out or damaging eyes and eyelids, cutting off or maiming the nose, cutting off or maiming ears, and causing wounds to other facial features such as the chin and the lips. Interestingly, injuries such as cutting and pulling off hairs or damage to the teeth might literally be termed superficial. This indicates that the injuries to the head were most common cause of death, and if one survived, they could receive compensation for their participation in the battle and sustained injuries. The archeological remains very often display a blunt weapon injuries to the skull, including blade injuries. It is also evident that soldiers higher in ranks were using double-edged swords used for slashing enemies' limbs and faces. Another common injury found by archaeologists is a direct hit by a projectile, such as arrow in the face, or eye area, or stone, which could be thrown from above or shot from the machine. Arrow wounds were particularly difficult to treat, and those recorded in the written evidence were usually fatal, compounded in many cases by the difficulty of removing an arrowhead that might be barbed or poisoned. Injuries to the flesh or bruises are probably much more common than archaeologists can anticipate, due to the fact that the findings that reveal injuries to the bone were very often fatal in their consequences. This indicates that superficial wounds could be treated, leaving the survivor with lifelong debilitations. Earlier sources rarely describe these injuries in much details. Old French epic called Raoul de Cambrai is a rich source of details about potential injuries that one could sustain during the battle. In one of the paragraphs we can read,
He has cut off a great section of the golden circuit and all the nose guard that lay in the path of his blow, wounding him slightly in the face. The boy was stunned by the blow.
There are also descriptions of forehead and cheek injuries. Raoul de Cambrier also describes how one might die during medieval battle. There are many references to brain dashed or many brains lying cold, also brains spilling over his eyes, indicating that head was a major target in close combat situation and removal or damage to the helmet was a key to many deaths. It also raises a question about protective gear. The laws of the Lombard king Aistulf describes the equipment that was required by the men of different status. However, it does not include helmets. More cruel descriptions from Raoul de Cambrier includes:
Raoul seized a big spear shaft, angrily raised it up high and hit young Bernier as he approached, fetching his head such a powerful crack that his delicate ermine was showered with blood.
Medieval records also describes accidents that happened during a swordplay that led to dramatic consequences.
Young Charles, while he only meant to enjoy some horseplay with other young men of his age, was struck in the head with a sword by a youth named Alban. The blow penetrated almost as far as the brain, reaching from his left temple to his right cheekbone and jaw.
No matter how dramatic some of the injuries were, many of them could be treated. Early medieval law of medicine makes a distinction between what could and could not be treated, and makes a clear difference between theoretical and practical medicine. It can be observed in the comment made by Ibn Ridwin in 1068.
I divide the teaching of medicine into two parts. One is theoretical, which is to be studied either from the books of Hippocrates or those of Galen. The other is practical, by which I mean the study of bone setting, the restoration of dislocation, incision, suturing, cautery, lacing, remedies and all other manual procedures.
In words of another physician, Theodore of Bologna, on to be well read,
it means to be able to link the treatment of the wounds to the knowledge of the internal working of the body.
In the Old English medical book, known as Liege books, there are descriptions of treatments of broken head that require application of the medicine and removal of the shattered bones. In addition to this, Codex of Law also described that physicians have to evaluate, comment and choose the treatment for injured patients. This was required from the legal context. It was also described if the brain is exposed, it should be touched, treated with clean cloth, and if the brain matter spills, medic plugs it with medicines and silk, and afterwards it heals, and this is proven. Archeological investigation conducted at the early medieval German cemetery showed that 30 of deceased had cranial fractures and 3/4 of this has healed, indicating survival. Evidence also indicates that surgical methods such as drilling, lifting or scraping of surrounding bone to remove impacted fragments were used to treat head traumas. With appropriate treatment, scalp eventually heals, covering the site, taking the trauma had not affected the brain. This is why trepanation, which is a process of drilling a hole in the skull, took place to release the pressure of depressed fractures on the cerebrum. Also, if the area of head fracture was cleaned properly, this could prevent the infection, which could be detrimental. Treatment also included cutting away bad flesh, cauterizing but then applying emulsion to the wound before adding honey, which both protected and healed with its aseptic qualities. And those are the types of injuries that medieval soldier might experience on the battlefield and their potential methods of treatments. To be honest, when I came up with the idea for this video, I did not expect how much of a brain matter it will involve. I mean, one does realize about the amount of violence that was present on the medieval battlefield. However, what usually comes to mind is blood, maybe cut off limbs, and heads in lying bodies, not brains littering the place. At the same time, we can see that medieval medicine was doing its best to try to treat the people that suffered what was called then a minor injuries, or cases such as broken skulls or gouged eyes. I guess we should be thankful for how medicine progressed throughout the ages and that we are living in relatively peaceful times, if someone can call them that way. So, thanks to everyone who watched this video. It was really fun researching this topic. Please leave a like, comment and subscribe to be up to date with all the bio news. Right now, I wish you all the best and I see you in the next one.